Hi, dear listeners. Welcome to our podcast for learning English. I'm Alexa.
And I'm Alex. Today, we're going to talk about Plato. We'll use simple words to help you learn. So, let's start, and remember to subscribe to our channel.
Plato was a famous Greek philosopher. He lived a long time ago, about 2,400 years. His ideas are still important today. He believed in wisdom, justice, and truth. Plato wrote many books where he shared his ideas with others.
Yes, that's true. One of his most famous works is called The Republic. In this book, Plato talks about a perfect society where everyone works together for the good of all. He believed that only the wisest people should be leaders to make the best choices for everyone.
Plato also talked about education. He thought education was very important for people. He believed it helps us understand the world and become better people. Plato started a school called the Academy in Athens, where he taught his ideas.
Yes, education was very important to him. He believed that learning helps us become wiser and make better decisions in life. At his school, students learned about philosophy, science, and even mathematics. Plato wanted everyone to keep asking questions and finding answers.
One of Plato's famous ideas is the allegory of the cave. In this story, people live in a cave, and they only see shadows on the wall. Plato said that the shadows are like our limited understanding, and real knowledge is outside the cave, in the light.
That's right. Plato believed that most people only see the shadows, not the full truth. But with education, people can leave the cave and see the real world, just like moving from darkness to light. It's a very important lesson about understanding and learning.
Plato also believed in something called forms or ideas. He said that everything in the world is a copy of a perfect version that exists somewhere else. For example, a chair we sit on is just a copy of a perfect chair that only exists in our mind.
Exactly. These perfect versions of things are what Plato called forms. He thought that these forms are more real than the things we can touch and see. Plato said that philosophers, like himself, try to understand these perfect forms through thinking.
Plato's teacher was another famous philosopher, Socrates. Socrates didn't write anything down, but Plato wrote about his conversations. Plato shared Socrates' method of asking questions to find the truth. This method is called the Socratic method.
Yes, the Socratic method is still used in schools today. It's all about asking and answering questions to make us think deeply about things. Instead of just giving answers, Socrates and Plato believed in finding the truth through discussion and thought.
Plato also had a student named Aristotle, who became a very famous philosopher himself. Plato and Aristotle had some different ideas, but they both helped to shape the way people think about philosophy and the world around them.
That's right. Aristotle learned a lot from Plato, but he had his own ideas too. Together, Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle are considered some of the greatest thinkers in history. Their ideas have influenced philosophy, science, and even politics.
Plato didn't just talk about thinking. He also cared about how we should live our lives. He believed that living a good life means being fair and just. He thought that wisdom, courage, and self-control were very important for everyone.
Plato's idea of a good life was about balance. He believed that if we use reason, we can control our emotions and desires. He thought that when people use their minds wisely, they can live happily and help others in society.
One thing Plato wrote about is the soul. He believed that every person has a soul, and the soul is divided into three parts: reason, spirit, and desire. Reason should guide the other two, to help us live a balanced and good life.
Yes, the idea of the soul was very important to Plato. He believed that our souls continue to live even after we die. He thought that philosophy helps people take care of their souls by teaching them to focus on wisdom and truth.
Another idea Plato talked about is justice. In the Republic, Plato says that justice means everyone doing their part in society. He thought that a fair society is one where people do the work that fits their talents, and leaders are wise and just.
Plato also believed that in a just society, everyone works together for the common good. He thought that when people focus on what's best for everyone, not just themselves, society becomes better and more peaceful.
One interesting thing Plato believed is that art can sometimes be dangerous. He thought that artists can make people feel strong emotions, but those emotions can lead them away from thinking clearly. He believed that philosophy was more important than art.
Yes, Plato had a complex view of art. He worried that some art could confuse people or make them act emotionally, without thinking. But he also believed that art could inspire people and help them understand deeper truths if used wisely.
Plato's influence goes beyond philosophy. His ideas also affected politics and education. Even today, schools and governments are shaped by some of Plato's thoughts. He believed in the power of knowledge to improve society.
That's very true. Many of Plato's ideas are still studied today. Philosophers, students, and even leaders read his work to learn about justice, knowledge, and society. Plato's writings continue to inspire people to think about how to live wisely.
Plato's books are not always easy to read, but they are full of deep thoughts. If you are learning English, you might try reading some of the simple stories or summaries of Plato's ideas to help you understand his important lessons.
Yes, starting with simple summaries is a great idea. Plato's ideas can teach us not only about philosophy, but also about how to think better and understand the world. His lessons can help us improve our English reading and thinking skills.
Plato believed that true knowledge comes from deep thinking, not just from what we see with our eyes. He used the example of a person looking at shadows on a wall. Just like in the allegory of the cave, Plato thought that most people only see a small part of the truth. Real knowledge, according to Plato, comes from looking beyond appearances and understanding the deeper reality behind things.
Plato's idea of the Philosopher King is another key concept in his work. He thought that the best leaders should not be rich or powerful people, but those who are wise. He believed that philosophers who seek truth and wisdom would be the most fair and just rulers. This idea was important in the Republic, where Plato described a perfect society with wise leaders guiding everyone.
One of Plato's most famous students, as we mentioned earlier, was Aristotle. While Aristotle respected Plato, he had different ideas about the world. Aristotle focused more on science and the physical world, while Plato focused more on ideas and forms. Together, they created two different but very important ways of thinking that continue to influence philosophy today.
Plato's impact on education was huge. He believed that education should not just be about memorizing facts, but about developing the mind. His academy was the first school of higher learning in the Western world. It inspired future schools and universities. Plato believed that learning helps people become better citizens and live more meaningful, thoughtful lives.
In the Republic, Plato talks about justice not just for individuals, but for the whole society. He says that a just society is one where everyone has a role and does what they're best at. Plato believed that society should be divided into three classes: the rulers, the soldiers, and the workers. Each class has its own job, and justice comes when everyone works together for the common good.
Plato's idea of the tripartite soul is interesting. He believed that the soul has three parts: reason, spirit, and desire. Reason should be in charge, guiding the spirit and desire to help us make good choices. If desire controls us, Plato said, we become selfish and act without thinking. But when reason is strong, we make better decisions and live a balanced life.
Plato didn't just talk about ideas and philosophy. He also thought a lot about how we should live our daily lives. He believed in moderation, or balance, in all things. Plato thought that people should avoid extreme behaviors and emotions. He said that true happiness comes from living a balanced life where you use reason to control your emotions and desires.
One of the most famous stories about Plato is about the ring of Gyges. In this story, a man finds a ring that makes him invisible. Plato asks the question, if you could do anything without anyone knowing, would you still do the right thing? He believed that people should be just, even when no one is watching, because justice is about doing what's right, not just avoiding punishment.
Plato's writings also focused on love and friendship. In his work Symposium, Plato explores different ideas about love. He talks about love not just as something romantic, but as a deep connection between people that helps them become better and wiser. Plato believed that true love helps us grow as individuals and understand the world in a more meaningful way.
Plato was not just interested in philosophy for adults. He believed that children should also learn about philosophy and think about big questions. He thought that teaching children to ask questions and think deeply would help them grow into wiser, better adults. Plato believed that education should start early and continue throughout a person's life.
Plato's academy wasn't just for philosophers. It was a place where people studied all kinds of subjects, like mathematics, science, and politics. Plato believed that all knowledge is connected. He thought that studying different subjects helps people understand the world better. This idea still influences how we learn in schools and universities today.
Plato's influence on politics can't be ignored. His ideas about leadership, justice, and society are still talked about today. He believed that a good leader should be wise and focused on the good of the people, not on personal gain. Many of Plato's ideas have shaped modern political thought, and his work is still studied by leaders and philosophers alike.
Plato's focus on questioning everything is another important lesson for English learners. When we learn a new language, it's important to keep asking questions and thinking deeply about what we're learning. Just like Plato's students, we can improve by being curious, by thinking carefully, and by always asking why as we study English and other subjects.
Another lesson from Plato is the importance of communication. Plato believed that talking and discussing ideas with others helps us learn. In fact, many of Plato's books are written as conversations or dialogues between different people. Just like in learning English, talking with others helps you practice, share ideas, and get better at using the language.
Plato's dialogues are also a great way to improve your reading skills in English. Even though the original texts are difficult, there are many simplified versions of his dialogues. These can help you practice reading and understanding deeper ideas in a way that's easier for English learners. Reading Plato in a simpler form can help improve your vocabulary and thinking.
Plato believed in the power of the mind. He thought that thinking deeply about life, asking questions, and searching for the truth helps people live better, happier lives. This is true for English learners as well. When you focus on thinking and practicing, your skills in speaking, reading, and writing will improve. Plato's lessons can inspire us to keep learning and growing.
Plato's idea of forms can also teach us something about language learning. Just like he believed there's a perfect version of everything, we can think about our language skills in the same way. We might not be perfect yet, but with practice and hard work, we can get closer to that perfect form of speaking and understanding English.
Plato's lessons on wisdom and truth remind us that learning is a journey. Just like in philosophy, learning English takes time and effort. Plato believed that the search for truth was never-ending, and the same goes for learning a language. We must keep practicing, keep asking questions, and keep improving little by little every day.
Another thing Plato taught is the idea of self-control. He believed that we must control our desires and emotions in order to live a good life. This can be a great lesson for English learners. Sometimes learning can feel hard, but if we stay patient and control our frustrations, we can improve step by step, just like Plato believed in steady progress.
Plato's ideas about leadership are also important for us today. He believed that true leaders must be wise, just, and focused on the common good. As learners, we can be leaders in our own learning journey. We can take charge of our studies, practice regularly, and seek wisdom in our language practice, just like Plato's Philosopher Kings.
Plato's influence on modern thought is clear, especially in education. His belief that learning and thinking are the keys to a better society still resonates today. For English learners, this means that education is not just about learning a new language, but also about growing as a person. Plato reminds us that learning improves our minds and our lives.
Another great lesson from Plato is the value of conversation. In his dialogues, Plato shows how important it is to talk with others to understand big ideas. For English learners, this is a reminder to practice speaking with others. Conversations help you think more clearly and express your thoughts in English, just like Plato used dialogue to explore philosophy.
Plato's allegory of the cave is also a great metaphor for learning. In the cave, people only see shadows, not the real world. Learning English is like leaving the cave. You start to see the real world more clearly as you improve. With practice, English becomes easier, and you can understand more, just like Plato's idea of moving from darkness to light.
Plato's belief in the importance of wisdom reminds us that learning English is not just about memorizing words. It's about understanding the language deeply, using it to think and communicate clearly. Just like Plato believed in searching for deeper truths, we must go beyond just learning words and sentences. We must learn to express our ideas clearly in English.
Plato's idea of balance is something we can apply to learning English too. He believed in balancing reason, emotions, and desires. For English learners, it's important to balance practice with rest and to stay motivated without getting overwhelmed. By taking your time and practicing regularly, you can achieve balance in your language learning journey.
To sum up, Plato's ideas have inspired people for thousands of years. His thoughts on wisdom, justice, education, and balance can help guide us not just in life, but also in learning English. By asking questions, practicing regularly, and thinking deeply, we can improve our language skills and live more meaningful lives, just like Plato encouraged.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion about Plato and learned something new. Remember, like Plato said, learning is a lifelong journey, and each step brings you closer to wisdom.
And don't forget, practicing English is part of that journey too. Keep learning, stay curious, and never stop asking questions.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to our channel for more English learning tips and discussions. See you next time.